When a tragedy strikes, it unfolds in the most unexpected ways. There are no ominous narrations, no suspenseful melodies, no hints that the ordinary will suddenly transform into an extraordinary event. In an instant, a cataclysm can reveal its devastating maw, leaving behind only a wake of chaos and despair for those who were left to bear witness. The air was chilly in November, and amidst the anticipation of a 4-day weekend for Thanksgiving, the impending doom of semester finals loomed over us, clouding our excitement. My mother, an English teacher for the junior class, had her classroom situated on the lowest floor. The descending staircase to her classroom was flanked by bare water and gas lines, starkly contrasting against the cold concrete. The steps were covered in that odd rubber or perhaps vinyl material. It seemed to embody the essence of a penitentiary. On that morning, I found myself in a science class, working on our finals with my best friend, and a familiar face from the past. The details of the assignment escape me now. All that remains etched into my memory is the impending dread that was about to unfold. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. The events that followed transpired with such swiftness that they seemed simultaneously awe-inspiring and terror-inducing. As I recall, we were finalizing the evidence for our report when my ears popped, as if I just rolled down the windows of a speeding car. A jarring rumble then shook the entire classroom, accompanied by the deafening and concussive blast that robbed me of my breath. The piercing wail of the fire alarm echoed through the room as water rained down, drenching us. Instinctively, I sprang up from my desk, my black chair crashing forcefully against the table behind me. We hastily made our way towards the aisle between the rows of desks, abandoning our unfinished finals. Surprisingly, we maintained a semblance of order. The blaring fire alarm pierced through the air as our teachers wasted no time guiding us out of the classroom, and we obeyed. Like frightened sheep, we followed the teacher's lead, navigating the corridors towards the nearest exit, down the hall to the left, descending down to the lower level, finally outside. As I turned the last corner, my mother's classroom came into view, and what I beheld was a nightmare made manifest. Surreal terror gripped me, freezing me in place. My heart seemed to stop, yet its frantic pounding was louder than ever. My mother's classroom door, blown off its hinges, lay in a shattered heap against the opposing wall. The threshold between the door and frame was consumed by a furious inferno, raging and roaring with an uncontrollable fury. I was now the one to witness the wake of destruction. I don't know what compelled me to charge into that blazing maw. Was it delusions of invincibility, a desperate belief that I could save her like some superhero? Was it simply an act of need, driven by an unexplainable force? I cannot say, even now. I pushed through the wall of flames and smoke, and as soon as I crossed the threshold of the doorframe, the fire ceased its anger. Descending the staircase with the grace of a stumbling infant, my movements erratic and frantic, I hardly registered the loss of footing halfway down. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, dulling the pain as I tumbled, and I regained my balance on the final steps. And there, at the bottom step, an impossible coldness enveloped me. The chill of the air permeated my senses as I made it to the bottom step. Inside the room, obscured by the dense veil of smoke, the cries of the anguish echoed. Though the darkness enveloped everything, a faint glimmer from a small window illuminated my mother's desk. Yet the source of the agonizing wails seemed to come from across the room. A nervous sweat broke out on my brow as I ventured forward, guided by the sound. The acrid stench of burning flesh and hair assaulted my senses, threatening to overpower me. Gradually, my eyes adjusted to the darkness, granting me an unwelcome gift of sight. I wish it would have failed me in that moment. The horrifying images etched deeply into my psyche. Charred bodies strewn across the floor, their limbs twisted and contorted. Some still smoldered, becoming consumed by the thin lines of crimson that crawled greedily along the blackening skin, reducing skin to ash. The scene was catastrophic. It's repulsive. A nauseating sensation crept up from within, that familiar prelude to vomiting. I fought to suppress it, driven by a primal instinct to focus on the crying emanating from the overturned desk in the far corner of the room. That must be my mom. She's still alive. I thought so naively. My path was obscured by lifeless forms of classmates, and I could hear the blaring alarms that somehow withstood the blast. Deep down, my gut warned me to leave the scene to my imagination, but I ignored its plea. Almost reaching the desk, my attention was drawn to yet another body laying in my path. This one was slightly larger than the others. It took only a moment to realize the unthinkable. This was my mother. Her right side was gruesomely absent, her eyes clouded with a milky white. Her jaw hung slack. She lost an arm, a leg. Dead. My mother lay lifeless at my feet. The sound of sobbing erupted again, originating from behind the desk. No discernible words, just heartbreaking sobs. Setting aside my grief for the moment cloaked in shock, I left my mother's side to aid this person. The true magnitude of the disaster had not yet fully sunk in, the realization that no one could have survived. The crying grew louder as I approached, echoing not only in my ears but in my thoughts. It drowned out the clamor of the alarms. It was as if I was ensnared in a waking dream, where the cries became my sole focus, blotting out every other sense. Reaching the desk, I cautiously peered behind it, my eyes drawn to a huddled figure in the corner. His blackened skin mirrored the others, and he possessed little remaining hair. Tremors coursed through his body as he faced the wall, arms extended limply, wrists hanging from his forearms. "Hey," I yelled. "Are you okay? Can you move?" I said as I maneuvered around the desk. Looking back on it now, it was incredibly obvious that he wasn't okay. No response, though. I thought maybe the explosion damaged his hearing. Instinctively, I reached out and grasped his hand. The moment our skin made contact, the crying ceased. The tremor subsided. Slowly, he began to turn his head towards me, his neck moving with these jerky, disjointed snaps. And then I beheld his face. Leathery skin clung to his emaciated skull, while his wide eyes, milky gray and white, mirrored my mother's. Through his slacked jaw, browned teeth peeked out, devoid of lips. His broken nose sat withered upon his face. Completely naked, his leathery skin continued down his skeletal frame, with patches peeling off, revealing a putrid yellow fluid oozing from the infected wounds. I stood there in shock, taking in his convulsions and heaves. Suddenly, his head rocked like that of a newborn, and he took a ragged, strained breath. Then he let out a sound unlike anything I've ever heard. No, that's not the right way to describe it. The sound triggered a sensation within me, a feeling that wasn't entirely my own. I was engulfed by an overwhelming grief, an intense pain that consumed me entirely. Guilt as I had never known it washed over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. I recoiled from the desk, stumbling backwards until I fell onto my mother's charred remains. A cloud of ash billowed forth, caressing my face as I gasped for air. I inadvertently hailed a plume of my mother's ash. I vomited on myself immediately, tears streaming uncontrollably. Crawling onto my hands and knees, I distanced myself from the nightmare, my existence teetering on the brink. I crawled, and then I ran once I regained my footing. I ran out of that room, up the stairs, through the engulfing flames, through the school, past my bewildered classmates. I kept running. I ran and ran until my legs could no longer bear the weight of my body and my shattered reality. Just keep running. Eventually, I collapsed in a local park, where the police discovered me. The cold, crisp grass cradled my face, leaving damp imprints in conjunction with the desperate soaked tears. I had expected to run home, honestly, but I found I had fled in the opposite direction. The officer who found me sat silently beside me in the field, offering no words of advice nor encouragement. We both shivered as the cold crept into our bones. I laid in that field until I succumbed to the exhaustion and fell into a fitful sleep. I was so utterly exhausted. When the officer drove me home, I awoke to a reality that felt both distant and surreal. The following year slipped away in a haze, an amalgamation of twisting memories and blurred moments. I found myself residing in my mother's home, under the temporary custody of my aunt and uncle. The settlement from the life insurance payout, locked away in a conservatorship, offered a glimmer of financial security. Grateful for their decision, I thanked my lucky stars that my aunt did not seize the opportunity to claim the money as her own. Instead, she handed me a substantial sum of cash. It was an overwhelming amount for a 17-year-old to possess, while still grappling with the weight of the newfound responsibilities. In due course, I was granted emancipation, propelled forward by the financial freedom. Little did I know that this freedom would become the catalyst of a destructive spiral, deepening the void within my soul with every regretful choice. The passing months merged, as if time itself was nothing more than a fleeting illusion. I teetered on the precipice, constantly oscillating between moments of heroin-induced intoxication and near unconsciousness. My days were spent in a perpetual state of chasing a fragile equilibrium. And so, as predictable and anticlimactic as it may sound, I ended up overdosing on heroin. I vaguely recall the nature documentaries playing in the background as I craved another hit. Preparing the syringe, I found a suitable vein, and the liquid bliss coursed through my veins, flooding my senses. It was my 5th hit, 6th. It's more than I'd ever done before. The rush surged through my body with an intensity I couldn't bear. My balance faltered and I collapsed onto the couch, my head spinning in a disoriented haze. I slipped into unconsciousness, unaware of the vomit that spilled forth from my mouth. At that moment, I believe I was on the brink. In my haziness, I faintly recalled the piercing scream as someone entered the front door. I must have looked like the visual embodiment of death I had so longed for. It was my aunt who discovered me in this state, a sight she never deserved to see. She was far too good to be exposed to the wretchedness that had become me. Rehabilitation became an inevitable path, accompanied by the watchful eye to prevent any further harm. My therapist posited that the horrors I witnessed in my mother's classroom were a projection of my tormented mind, personifications of the hellish experiences I endured. In the ensuing months, I grappled with a profound sense of worthlessness despite the earnest efforts of those around me. Weeks bled into months, and progress towards my emotional and mental recovery became a slow, agonizing burn. No matter the tools, the coping mechanisms I acquired, no matter the mental acrobatics I performed, I found myself sinking deeper into the abyss. The insidious cravings for substance clung to my heart with a sickening tenacity. Over the following year, I retreated into seclusion, abandoning my education and embracing a life of isolation. Depression became my constant companion, blurring the days into an indistinguishable mess. I traded one vice for countless others, escaping reality through the endless hours of pornography and video games, despising every fiber of my existence late into the solitary nights. Even in sleep, I found no respite. My nights were tormented by relentless nightmares, unyielding in their pursuit of stealing away what little rest I had left. At my emotional nadir, I ceased to care for even my most basic needs. My body, an instrument of survival, was now perpetually hunched, bent by the weight of my deteriorating state. I had become a repugnant wreck, a physical manifestation of the turmoil within my mind. I was a mirror reflecting the distorted image of my shattered mentality. The battle against my demons was slipping through my fingers, and I was losing myself in the process. In time, my life embarked on a transformative journey, emerging from the shattered remnants of an existence that I had unwittingly come to call my solace. It began with a simple spark. Laughter. It wasn't a simple chuckle, it wasn't a little smirk, it was a belly laugh. The sound was so foreign to my ears. At that moment, I felt an immense pride swell within me. Soon after, I shed my former self, transitioning from a reanimated corpse into an animated being. A newfound addiction became growth, and I pursued it with unwavering fervor. I constructed a fortress, a barricade capable of withstanding the relentless onslaught of my mind. I tamed the internal chaos that had consumed me, gradually reclaiming control over my destiny. With every strained step, I crawled a feeble yet indomitable ascent up that treacherous mountain. Knowing that I had to venture beyond the confines of my childhood home to nurture my emotional development, I decided without hesitation. I relinquished my home to my aunt, packed my belongings, and embarked on a journey to Florida. Hell's waiting room. It became my homestead. I found refuge in a modest vacation cabin nestled amidst the serenity of the Everglades. I resided in splendid isolation. There were no neighbors for miles around, and the land I occupied belonged to a kind couple who were seldom present. The cabin was ensconced within the dense, humid forest, a sanctuary that provided ample opportunity to confront my innermost thoughts. Though the reclusive lifestyle persisted, I reveled in my newfound freedom. And there was something profoundly satisfying about basking in 80-degree warmth during the winter months. The forest that encircled me was a testament to nature's magnificence. It thrived with a resplendent beauty, teeming with life and vibrant hues. The symphony of bird song permeated the air, intertwining with the gentle hum of insects as the sun gracefully bid farewell to the sky, descending beyond the western horizon. It was a captivating contrast to the desolate nights I had once known. Occasionally, I would venture into an ocean-fed creek just a stone's throw away from my dwelling, indulging myself by fishing. It was precisely what I'd yearned for. My life had become my own once again. Though the memories of that faithful night still carried a tinge of pain, they had become more bearable, more manageable. I was on the precipice of uttering those elusive words, I am happy. The sun's warm embrace became my refuge, a serenity that held a promise of tranquility. In the daylight hours, nature's symphony serenaded me, and the world felt alive with hope. But as the twilight approached, apprehension still gripped my heart, for I feared the agonizing cries would envelop me once more. And then, my lamentations found me. The anguished cries pierced the silence, a restless reminder of the entity that haunted me. Sleep quickly became an elusive luxury, for as darkness descended, the haunting wails shattered my chances of rest. The cries persisted, growing louder with every passing day. They invaded my sleepless nights, penetrating the silence of my room. I lay there consumed by desperation, pleading for the torment to cease. Every night I fixated on those haunting sobs. The cries became a force that unleashed a deluge of forgotten pain, shattering the barricade I erected. The dormant rancor within me stirred, awakening with vengeance. My inner turmoil returned, engulfing me in a tempest that left me gasping for breath. My resilience crumbled like sand slipping through my trembling fingers. The laughter that once danced upon my lips died in my throat. I broke so quickly, so quietly. Fatigue wore me down, transforming me into another mere shadow of my former self. I became a captive in my own mind, ensnared by the unrelenting screams. Yet within the depths of my despair, a spark of hope still wavered amidst the chaos. There's no way there's actually something following me. I vowed to confront the source of this nocturnal torment, to unravel its perplexing grip on my life. With each passing day, I slowly fortified my resolve, gathering the shattered pieces of my spirit. The journey ahead remained daunting, but the glimmer of hope illuminated the path. I clung to the belief that someday, somehow, I would break free from the clutches of this. Then, one fateful night, a strange sensation tugged at my consciousness, rousing me from my slumber. The room was shrouded in a stale silence. The clock displayed the time as 1:26 a.m. It was the dead of night, yet mercifully devoid of the haunting cries. With a sense of cautious curiosity, I rose from my seat and made my way towards the front door, spurred by a newfound audacity. I recall thinking I should step outside, Prove to myself there's nothing there. Prove to myself that the crying I hear is simply in my head. As I approached the door, I envisioned walking outside and wondered where I should go. That night, the air was weirdly calm, absent of the usual bug song. I pressed my face against the small window on the door, peering out into the darkness, fully expecting to find only an indistinct shadow. But to my astonishment, there it stood, staring back at me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Our faces were separated by a mere fraction of an inch of glass, locked in a macabre face-to-face encounter. A cacophony of screams erupted, shattering the once tranquil air and sending tremors through the very foundations of my home. The feeble glow of the kitchen illuminated its face, etching its haunting contours deep within the recesses of my mind. His quivering jaw moved erratically, a grotesque dance of opening and closing with each labored breath. Each exhale birthed the clinging mist, smearing the glass with intricate Rorschach patterns, transforming its pristine surface into a befitting artistry. His vacant eyes remained fixed ahead, devoid of recognition, as if ensnared within the merciless clutches of an unyielding madness. With unsteady steps, it gradually retreated, its form eventually shrinking into a crouched position, mere feet away from my door. There was no denying the presence before me. Frozen in a state of profound shock, I just stood there, grappling with the maelstrom of emotions. Fear, curiosity, twisted fascination intertwined within me, forming a turbulent whirlwind of conflicting impulses. Who was he? What did he want? Was it a he? Questions plagued my mind, but the answers eluded me. It was as if this apparition had materialized from the depths of my darkest nightmares, haunting my reality with its unsettling presence. Though an unsettling truth settled within me, there was no denying the raw reality of his existence. This was no figment of my imagination. It was a chilling encounter with a realm beyond my comprehension. My scream tore through the air, an instinctual response fueled by the surge of primal emotions. No coherent words could encapsulate the overwhelming turmoil within me. Anger, fear, frustration merged into a sickening sensation that gnawed at my core. I had grown tired of the sleepless nights and the life that no longer felt like mine. I had escaped across the country to flee from this torment, yet here it was, huddled just feet away, mocking my desperate attempt at solace. It felt like a cruel joke my own mind was playing on me. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice cracking as tears streamed down my face. "Please, just leave me alone." My cries resembled the agonized wails of a wounded and trapped animal, raw and untamed. Outside, the creature continued its relentless screams, rising to its feet again with a disjointed movement. It approached my door, its contorted posture resembling the grotesque position of a late-stage tetanus patient, skin tearing as it leaned. "Leave me alone!" I yelled, unleashing a surge of pent-up emotion that had been dormant for far too long. But my plea fell upon rotting ears that could not comprehend or sympathize, and it reached my door. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind during the early days in the forest, over and over. I had imagined how I would confront and eradicate this embodiment of my deteriorating sanity. Suicide was not my desire. I had chosen this entity to be a symbol of my mental decline, the effigy in which my deserved future lay flayed in a blood eagle-like fashion upon the altar of my current reality. Driven by panic and instinct, I grabbed the fire axe above my table, my body moving mechanically as I propelled myself towards the barrier that separated us. A wordless scream of terror, revulsion, hatred erupted from deep within me as I crashed through the door, my clenched teeth unable to contain the overwhelming intensity of emotion. The creature was struck by the door, its body forcefully pushed backwards, eliciting a feral gasp from its throat. I was determined to end this. Kill it. The words reverberated in an unsettling loop within my mind, out of sync with each other, fueling my purpose as I prepared to face the culmination of my anguish. In a whirlwind of uncontrolled movements, I tumbled down the steps, my body flailing as I crashed into the unyielding ground. Before I could fully process the fall, I found myself back on my feet, instinctively rising without conscious thought. And there it was, face to face with me, its breath uncomfortably warm and sticky against my skin. The putrid stench of decay invaded my nostrils, causing me to recoil in fear and repulsion. I felt my courage waver and my resolve crumble. I realized I was not strong enough. I wasn't capable of facing this. I backpedaled until I was pressed against the wall of my house. Then it screamed, convulsed, and trembled before me, its milky eyes fixed on an unseen horizon. Its hand stretched out, reaching for something beyond my comprehension. With that scream, a surge of courage and rage flooded my being. It was the same as it had been all those years ago in school, an overwhelming flood of emotions that were not truly mine to feel. It's difficult to articulate, but I embodied those emotions and allowed them to engulf me, to consume me. The word reverberated relentlessly in my mind. Springing forward with a wild scream, I swung the axe with all my might, the blade sinking deep into its side. The sensation of bone deflecting the force of my strike is etched into my memory, never to be forgotten. Blood and other fluids sprayed from the wound as it took a few faltering steps to the side, pushed by the momentum of my assault. The creature ceased its cries, its tremors, breath. Time stood still as it finally turned to look at me. Fear rooted me in place. Holding me captive in its gaze, we stared at each other, locked in a moment that felt like an eternity. Foul breath washed over me once more, seeping into my senses. Beyond that, nothing happened. We simply stood there, locked in a silent exchange. Slowly, I willed my frozen bones to thaw, my mind transitioning from terror and frenzy rage to something else. It wasn't pride, but rather a different, indiscernible emotion. Yet it carried a sense of triumph. Unbeknownst to me, it had reached out a hand and gently grasped my arm, its touch going unnoticed until it began to speak. I never meant to scare you. It rasped, its voice torn and ragged, struggling to emerge between shallow breaths. I'm sorry. This has to happen to you. It muttered, its words filled with agony and desperation. Tears welled up in its eyes, a flicker of pain crossed its face, and a ragged hand clutched at the axe lodged into the new laceration. Please, kill me. It wheezed, its plea reverberating in my mind and reaching my ears simultaneously. With its other hand, it gripped the axe and brought the blade to its neck. Kill me. Candle. Kill. Now. The final word echoed like an explosion within my head as its hand pressed against my face. Everything plunged into darkness for a fragmented moment as I swung my axe. Suddenly, I felt myself hurtling through space, a void engulfing me. The air grew cold and the wind whipped past, intensifying the disorienting descent. I screamed in a frenzy of confusion and terror, my voice lost to the abyss. Downward I plummeted, faster and faster, the nauseating sensation overwhelming me. Did I die? It's death. I'm dead. Thoughts of my imminent demise gripped my courage. But I resisted, unwilling to accept my fate just yet. In the distance, far below, a growing light pierced through the darkness. Fresh tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision and making it difficult to gauge the proximity of the light. I couldn't tell how much more time before I would be halted by the unforgiving ground. But it was rapidly approaching. I squeezed my eyes shut, unleashing a scream that echoed through the void. In the face of imminent death, I summoned every ounce of defiance within me. I want to live. The words echoed in my mind, a fervent plea repeating like a mantra. I crawled into a ball, bracing myself for the impending impact that would mark my brutal end. Seconds stretched into an eternity as I waited for the inevitable. Then, with a soft, gentle thud, I collided with the ground, the impact akin to falling off a couch. A feeble whimper escaped me, carrying with it remnants of my shattered pride. Slowly, I uncoiled my limbs and remained still, a mix of confusion and exhaustion paralyzing me. Was this death? Had I somehow managed to survive death? At the very least, I was conscious. I reached out with my hands, feeling the texture of a hardwood floor beneath me. I attempted to open my eyes, but darkness engulfed everything, rendering me blind with my surroundings. Rolling onto my back, I extended my arms as far as they would go, searching for walls that eluded my touch. Instead, only finding formless nothingness. A new fear emerged as a creeping suspicion arose. Do I still have a face? I don't know why this was a fear, but it was present nonetheless. With trepidation, I brought my unseen hands towards my face, and a sharp sting shocked me as my dirty, sweaty fingers met my open eyes. It burned. A faint chuckle escaped my lips, mingling with the tears that continued to cascade down my face. I released a weak, triumphant sigh, throwing my arms in the air, and the darkness claimed me once more, my consciousness slipping away. When I awoke, I found myself in an unfamiliar hallway, illuminated by an ethereal torchlight. Glancing around from my position on the floor, I took in the details of my surroundings. The hallway stretched endlessly in both directions. Its warped and aged dark wood floors were covered in a thick layer of dust. On each side of me, 2 doors stood, adorned with handles clad in aged bronze. Each door had a candle positioned above it. The peeling, curling white paint of the doors cast small shadows as they danced in the flicker of the flames. Ornate red and gold walls framed the hall, extending into the distance without interruption. The air hung still and thin, cold. Summoning my strength, I pushed myself upright, drawing a reflexive breath just to find out my lungs refused to cooperate. I couldn't draw in the air. An unsettling revelation that further shook my fragile state, yet amidst the disquietude and unexpected acceptance settled upon me. Maybe I truly am dead, I mused, while I massaged the bridge of my nose between my eyes. And perhaps this is limbo or something, some other place beyond the realm of the living. Standing before the doors, I brushed off the accumulated dust as my fingertips traced the bronze knobs. With hopeful anticipation, I attempted to turn the knob of the door on my right. It remained resolute. Disheartened, I turned my attention to the door on my left, hoping for a different outcome. Yet, once again, my efforts proved fruitless. The doors remained firmly shut, denying me entry. A sense of resignation settled over me as I contemplated the possibility that I had indeed entered a land of limbo or purgatory, where the deceased wander aimlessly seeking answers and respite. If there were lessons to be learned or tasks to be fulfilled, I had yet to discover them, but the absence of purpose, the prospect of eternal nothingness, weighed heavily on my soul. With a deep breath, I made a conscious decision to venture further into the darkness, forsaking the dwindling light behind me. Hours turned into an indeterminate passage of time as I traversed the boundless corridor, my hand trailing along beside me against the cold surface of the wall. Surprisingly, my fatigue and my hunger eluded me, further reinforcing the notion that I probably died. If this was the extent of my existence, an eternal cycle of aimless wandering, I yearned for something more. The prospect of mere nothingness, devoid of purpose or meaning, felt like a reality abandoned by the gods themselves. Determination and desperation mingled within me, urging me to maintain my pace and to keep moving forward despite the gnawing uncertainty. And then, a sudden burst of light ruptured the darkness behind me, catching me off guard. The icy tendrils of fear gripped my chest, causing me to flail and stumble, my yelp swallowed by the void. With a surprising display of grace, I flopped heavily on my stomach. I clambered to my hands and swiftly turned around, propelled by a sense of desperate longing. I hurtled towards the newfound light, driven by the unspoken fear that it would fade if I didn't reach it in time. Desperation fueled my actions as I lunged for the handle of the nearest door, seeking an anchor to halt my momentum. The handle remained steadfast, unyielding, as it abruptly halted my chaotic trajectory. With a surge of determination, I clutched the doorknob with both hands, pouring every ounce of strength I had into my attempt to pry it open. I threw my weight against the door. I pulled, I hit, I kicked, I pleaded in a desperate frenzy. But the door remained unafflicted. Exhausted, defeated, I crumpled against the door. Collapsing to my knees, buried my face in my folded arms. The tears flowed freely once again as a sense of hopelessness enveloped me. What was the point? There was nowhere to go. No escaping from this damned place. I was trapped, prisoned within my own personal purgatory. This is my punishment. Reality began to fracture, the veil of ignorance slowly lifting, Could I truly be dead? The realization dawned on me, shattering the feeble illusion of safety and acceptance. I wasn't okay. I wasn't safe. The weight of my unease bore down upon me, threatening to consume what little resolve remained. In the face of uncertainty, I whispered the truth that echoed within my being. I'm not okay. I rolled onto my side, curling into a tight ball. Clutching my legs close to my chest, I surrendered to the oceans that consumed me. I ceased all efforts, resigned to my fate. Time lost all meaning as I lay there, motionless, accumulating layers of dust upon my immobile body. Months, perhaps years, passed in the frozen state. I remained paralyzed, a monument to my despair and defeat. The weight of my surrender bore down upon me, and I grew stagnant in body and spirit. As time passed, a small voice emerged from the depths of my being, offering tiny shards of defiance. It urged me to continue, questioning why I should give up. The relentless nagging of that voice eroded the staleness of my resolve. And so, with great effort, I gave in to this persistent beckoning within. I began to stir, my brittle bones creaking and cracking in response to the tentative movements. Every inch of my being protested, muscles screaming as I defied the platitudes that had held me captive. The desire for something different, something more, ignited within me. It took time, but I managed to rise to a sitting position. My body clung stubbornly to the remnants of my self-imposed stagnation, resisting my will. But I knew I had to move. Just move. I whispered those two simple words to myself, a mantra in the stillness. With each painful twitch and every tear in my flesh, I pressed forward. The blinding light pierced through the darkness again, and I quickly shielded my eyes. The hallway, once shrouded in darkness, was now ablaze with a furious glow of burning candles, illuminating every inch of the endless walls adorned with their white doors. Shielding my eyes from the searing exposure, I recoiled from the scorching heat that began to radiate from the flames. Cautiously, I peered through the gaps in my fingers, and a sight greeted me that filled my heart with renewed hope. There, at the end of the hallway, lay an exit, a definite continuation beyond these confines. A rush of motivation coursed through my veins, igniting a fire within my soul. Leaning against the wall for support, I willed my near useless legs to carry me forward, pushing past the pain that resonated with each step. The longing to reach that final door consumed me, drowning out the agony that threatened to consume my frail body. I moved with a shaky shuffle that evolved into a stiff, determined speed walk. In retrospect, I can only imagine the nightmarish image I presented. But at that moment, all I wanted was to reach the end, to embrace the promise it had. With each passing door, I caught a glimpse of their numbered plaques. 37, 39, 41, 43. The numbers ascended, propelling me forward. As I squeezed my eyes shut again, I found myself running soon enough. The intensity of the light never faltered. The blinding light seared through my closed eyelids, a new symphony of pain. Perhaps I should have gauged the distance to the end. But in my blind pursuit, I collided with the ending of the wall with a resounding thud. The impact broke my nose, sending shockwaves of pain coursing through me, and I tumbled to the floor, disoriented and wounded at my own expense. As my body sprawled upon the ground, the once illuminated candles in the hallway extinguished one by one, enveloping the space behind me in an impenetrable darkness. Yet, amidst the obscurity, one candle remained defiantly aflame. The candle beside the door labeled 158. Its flickering glow drew my gaze, anchoring me to the present. The word reverberated within the recesses of my mind, its significance echoing relentlessly. And then, like a distant echo from the past, a strained and familiar voice permeated my thoughts. Kill, candle. It urged, a haunting reminder of the encounters I had faced. The voice, bearing the same ragged qualities that had sent chills down my spine before, emerged from the darkness, piercing the silence with its command. A low, ominous rumble stirred in the distance, a sound foreign and unsettling to my ears. It started as a mere murmur, barely perceptible. but gradually swelled in volume. Intensifying with each passing moment, the air seemed to thicken and vibrate with its evil energy, a growing force that quelled my surroundings. It was the sound of impending doom, a creeping darkness that threatened to swallow everything in its path. As the rumble resonated through the depths of my being, a profound unease began gnawing within me. It clawed beneath my skin, coiling around my muscles and sinew with a chilling grip. The sensation of impending nothingness clawed at my very core, filling me with deep-seated dread. It was a fear unlike any I'd ever experienced, a realization that I stood at the precipice of an irrevocable end. The weight of this knowledge settled heavily within the visceral stab of anxiety that sent tremors through me. The world around me seemed to hold its breath as if bracing the impending collision with the unimaginable void. I stood helplessly transfixed, caught between fight and flight, a deer in headlights. The rumble grew louder, reverberating with a resonance that shook the very fabric of reality. And it quivered under its weight. With trembling hands, I clutched at the doorknob. My small rattles quickly became me desperately trying to twist it open, but the doorknob remained stubbornly locked. The rumble grew louder as the unstoppable force closed in on me. Panic surged within me, causing me to frantically shake the door in a wild desperation, but still it resisted, unyielding to my futile attempts. Kill, candle. The words thundered in my mind, echoing over the impending roar that threatened to consume me. It was a command, a directive to extinguish the flame. In a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I realized what I had to do. I reached out, smothering the candle's flame with my bare hand. And at last, the door swung open. I was violently thrust forward, pulled into the void that lay beyond. The deafening roar receded behind me, replaced by a disorienting rush of motion as I spun and flailed, completely at the mercy of another unseen force. Control slipped from my grasp once more, leaving me in surrender to the unknown as I flipped and spun through the void once again. Abruptly, the tumult ceased, and I found myself standing outside my own house, a surreal tableau frozen in time. There, I witnessed an enigmatic moment, a version of myself suspended mid-swing, the axe poised to strike through the creature's neck. It was a fractured moment of the reality that I had left behind all those years ago. A moment frozen in space and time. Taking a hesitant step forward, I was abruptly hurled back into my body. The fragments of my existence reuniting, time resumed its course, and I felt the weight of the axe as it carried out its intended purpose. The blade connected with a solid, metallic impact, tearing a new rift in the fabric of reality. I was again plunged into a jarring darkness. A whirlwind of confusion was the only thing familiar anymore. The musty scent of familiarity, reminiscent of my high school days, filled the air, punctuating the otherwise suffocating silence. In an instant, my vision returned, but this time with a disorienting rush accompanied by a dizzying vertigo. I found myself standing in the classroom where my mother used to teach, a place I hadn't set foot in for years. Confusion clouded my thoughts as I turned my gaze to the left. There she was, my mother, staring at me in disbelief. A collective gasp rose from the students, their eyes fixed upon me with fear and horror. The weight of their stares pressed upon me, making me actually aware of the unusual circumstances I found myself in. I glanced at my feet in habitual embarrassment, and there I noticed the axe embedded in the gas line, emitting an ominous hiss that sliced through the thick silence. My eyes darted back to my mother, and on her desk, illuminated by a solitary burning candle, my gaze fixated. The word echoed relentlessly in my mind, its significance growing with each repetition. In a reflexive surge of urgency, I released my grip on the axe. Discarding any semblance of thought, I prepared myself towards that desk, driven by a desperate need to extinguish the flame, but my efforts were in vain. For as my fingers reached out, a catastrophic chain of events unfurled before me, and in an instant, the classroom erupted into a fierce conflagration, an inferno that devoured everything in its path. The sheer force of the explosion shook the very foundation of reality, hurling me against the wall, and my body crumpled behind a nearby desk. Charred and broken, my form bore the scars of the blast, yet my consciousness stubbornly refused to let go. I felt the pain unparalleled to anything else I'd ever experienced. Amidst the chaos, I gathered myself and began to crawl towards my mother's mangled figure. She laid there torn asunder, yet desperately still clinging to life. With every ounce of strength left in me, I painstakingly dragged my injured body towards her, my movements a testament to sheer determination. My hands reached out, seeking connection, but instead encountered her severed limb. Undeterred, I reached for my mother, and she extended her remaining arm, seizing my hand with a desperate grasp, our bond unbroken even in the face of such devastation. "Mom! Mom!" I sobbed, my voice choked with anguish. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt over her broken form. "Mom, I'm so sorry!" I sobbed, my voice choked with anguish. Tears streamed down my face as I knelt over her broken form. "Mom, I'm so sorry!" I cried out, the words punctuated by deep sobs. "Mom, I'm so sorry!" Her eyes met mine, and in that delicate moment, she mustered all she had to utter a sweet whisper. "I love you." She barely managed, a weak attempt at a smile gracing her lips. But as her grip weakened, her hand slipped away, surrendered to the pull of gravity. I collapsed once more, pressing my head against her scorching shoulder, the flames from her burning clothing licking and tearing at my tear-soaked eyes. At that moment, the white-hot pain of loss eclipsed any physical pain I might have felt. A wave of bile rose in my throat as the full weight of the tragedy unfolded upon me. With a realization that struck with cruel clarity, I hadn't succeeded. I didn't extinguish the candle. I failed once again, repeating the cycle for the 158th time.